Hello guys, welcome to a new video on Tower of God New World, and in this video I'm going to do the character review for Ijin. I'm going to talk about how good this unit is, then we're going to look at the skills, revolution, exclusive equipment, gear, ignition weapon, rapport, and finally team recommendations. But before doing so, I just wanted to briefly mention again whether you should pull or not for the collab units. I already talked about it in a previous video, but I still saw people asking in the comments whether they should pull or not. So I figured I'd add more information, and I decided to do it in this video because I will not be releasing the videos for Alice and 002 because I didn't have enough time. I'm preparing for my vacation in Lapland from December 11 to December 18, so I don't have the time physically to record more videos. I might record one more. I don't know if it's going to be a reaction video or if it's going to be one of the two character reviews. I don't know. So for that reason, I'm going to talk about this topic again here to try and clarify a bit more. And from my point of view, none of the units in this collab are mandatory to have. The closest to that would be Ijin that we're going to review today. All other three are a bit too niche for, like, they provide value in very restricted scenarios. And I'm going to briefly say why, but first I just wanted to mention more or less what you can expect to pay in terms of suspendium to max out all the units. And give or take, it should be around 240k, including the free tickets. Probably a bit less. If you're unlucky, maybe a bit more, but around that amount. The thing is, we're going to get Christmas soon, so they might release some shops where you have to use suspendium. And if not for Christmas, then definitely for half anniversary, that should be early January. And last year we had the pouches that were giving you some random stuff, and in there you had the chance of getting a pretty huge amount of normal summon tickets. I'm sure if they release some sort of pouches again, you will have not only the tickets but also the revolution mats. We didn't have those because a revolution was not a thing 1 year ago. And yeah, I think that's a safe spot to use your suspendium if you saved any, or in general for half anniversary they might be releasing a family head level unit. We don't know for certain, could be possible, but I don't know. From my point of view, it's still too early. From end of September to January is a very short time to be saving up resources. So I don't think they will do it, but you never know with Netmarble. They could just decide to do so that people are kind of forced to pay, kind of thing. So with all that being said, if you don't have at the very least 400k suspendium, I wouldn't even think about maxing all of them. Maybe you can max only one of the two banners, like the two SSR plus units, if you have at least 300k. I wouldn't even bother pulling if you have less than 300k suspendium. The only scenario that you could, for which you could decide to go for all of that, even though you only have 200k suspendium, is if you really have a shit ton of stacked up black market tickets, because at that point you can convert those for a family head or for the new units that we're going to get on December 18. If you don't have those things, and I mean 800, 900, 1000 black market tickets, then you can kind of say, okay, I'm good and I can afford to participate in this collab. If you're not, I wouldn't bother. You're not missing out on much. Sure, Ijin is really good. He's a really good unit. He's not going to be levels above what we already have in red, so you're not really missing out on much, but he's definitely a solid unit. Then if we look at 003, that I already released a review for her, she's a very niche support. She's a strong one, her buffs are crazy, but she's extremely situational. As I mentioned, only red DPS units, and she favors those red DPSs that have high damage single hits and not multi-hits, which means Jin and Alice. If you're not building one of those two, you won't really see that much of a difference. She will still be sort of impactful, but not like nowhere near worth it level, let's say. So that's it for 003. For 002, he's even more niche. Like, it's not like he has a restrictive niche like 003, but it just provides an 80% crit damage buff, which is not bad, but it's only applied while he is alive. So if he's dead, that buff is gone. And he also has a physical resistance shred with his Revolution 5. And that's whatever, I guess. So that's all he provides. It's not bad. Is it mandatory? No, I don't feel like I have any team where you say, oh, I wish I had 002. Maybe Ijin is the best user of 002, but that's about it. And for Alice, she has a niche as well, and that is if the enemy has only one healer, then she is great. If the enemy has two healers, she's a bit worse because she will not reliably stop every single heal, which kind of defeats the purpose a bit, but at least she gets the buff from her Revolution 4. If the enemy has no healer whatsoever, then Alice is basically worthless. Still, this is a pretty good niche to have. Like, it's a good counter to healers. So yeah, I wouldn't say like she's a worthless unit, but to do that, you don't really need investment. Like, you need investment if you want her to be a DPS unit, but if you just want her for utility to block heals, you don't even need to like have crazy dupes. She's ranged, she has a conceal. You can kind of keep her alive, not that reliably at high deficits, but can still work. So don't worry too much. You're not really missing out if you decide not to pull on this banner. But I already talked way too much, I would say. So let's go and talk about Ijin directly. We will start with the passive. Well, no, to be honest, I still have to say whether he's good or not. I already said that from my point of view, this guy is really good. If we look at every single DPS in the red element, he's probably the best one at the moment. It doesn't have as much damage as a Viol, but is a bit more versatile, and I find building him a bit easier. If you have Albedo Revolution 5, I would say Viol would still be above him, but depends on the scenario. I think Ijin is a bit more consistent than Viol. At least it doesn't have the RNG portion that the banks from Viol have. So all in all, I think is a bit better. So I would definitely recommend him as a DPS. Is it mandatory? Absolutely not. And the thing is, he cannot really do anything if he's not, at the very least, Revolution 4. And it would be better if he was like Revolution 5 for sure. At 3 red, he cannot be a DPS whatsoever. Like, he's not going to deal any kind of reasonable damage. And at 3 red, his best use case is just as a energy decrease, because he has an energy decrease at the beginning of the battle, which is pretty good. An HP recovery block, which is also pretty good. And then that's more or less it. He can survive quite well, so he's a good frontline unit to have. Some good utility, but nothing major, nothing crazy. So keep in mind, if you want him to be a DPS, go for that Revolution 5. And unfortunately, that's kind of a constant lately, where you really want to go for maxed out units. But I think that's normal, so not much we can do about it. Now, if we go over the skills, the passive is Bond. And what it does is that for every red element ally in the team, it will gain a 40% attack increase. So 40% minimum, 200% maximum. This is only important if you're using him as a DPS. if you're using him as a frontline unit and sort of a energy decrease, HP recovery block, etc., etc., you are not restricted to a mono red team. This is only for DPS Ijin, okay? The second part of the passive is that is going to gain a damage taken decrease for every surviving ally. So it will start a battle with 80% damage taken decrease. And for every unit that dies, obviously it will lose out the 20%, the damage taken decrease, but it will gain a 20% physical pierce, up to 80% if he's the only guy left in the team. And these effects cannot be removed with buff removal skills. This is really, really important. Really, really good. Then we have Revolution 4 effect. That is what turns him into a DPS of sorts. And that is every damage you deal to a bleeding enemy is a crit hit. Pretty good. So I really like this Revolution 4 and it's really, really strong. Then we have the active skill that he uses at the start of the battle, Maneuver Switch. He's going to become invincible and dash at the enemy, dealing 800% of his attack as damage, stun them for 4 seconds, and block HP recovery for 8 seconds. And then he's also going to evade all enemy skills for 8 seconds. Really good for survivability, really good utility with the HP recovery block, and that's pretty much it. He's also going to gain an additional effect with the exclusive equipment, but we're going to read that later. Then he has No Mercy. It's just a simple AoE attack that's going to make enemies bleed for 10 seconds and deal some DOT damage. That's all there is to it. Then we have the special move numbered 001. This is an AoE attack that deals damage 5 times and then a 6th time throwing a grenade and sending enemies airborne. The total multiplier is not bad, it's 2800. And then there is also a bleeding because every time you hit, the enemy will bleed for 6 seconds, dealing 200% attack damage every second. Really, really good. And he's going to evade every attack while using this skill, which is important for reasons we're going to see in the exclusive equipment and also for Alocasia, let's say. And just survivability in general, really, really good. And then his evasion is going to increase by 60% for 8 seconds. Really, really strong. Then we have the Revolution 5 effect. That is a 60% attack increase for 10 seconds every time it makes an enemy bleed with number 001. Max 5 stacks, so up to 300% attack increase. Plus the 200% from the passive. We can already see how much attack this guy is gaining. So even though he is a warrior, his damage output will be pretty substantial. And yeah, that's pretty much the skill. We already went over the Revolution, but let's also have a look at the subnodes that I did not invest in at the moment. All of them are pretty much good. You definitely want some effect resistance. You might even want some evasion. Is not mandatory. It will still dodge anyway. You don't really care too much, but potentially you could invest in evasion as well. I threw in 4 points in lifesteal just to have a 5%. I think that's more than enough, so I'm not going to level it any higher. Then we have Revolution 4 that I mentioned that is going to make every hit against a bleeding enemy a crit. With the subnode crit damage increase plus 90%. Really, really important. I still haven't upgraded it. I was kind of saving on my Revolution fragments because I'm not spending in Revolution fragments anymore, so I'm kind of trying to save. I don't really feel the need to have Ijin as a DPS right now for my account, so I'm not doing it. But definitely, if you're planning to use Ijin as a DPS, this is a must upgrade node. HP and defense, they're only worth it once you are at very high deficits where, like, without them it would die in one hit. Then you might think of upgrading them. I don't need them at the moment, so I'm not. Crit hit resistance, only useful in PvP, basically. I wouldn't bother. Special move resistance is not bad. So we have a 60% damage reduction on special move. So cool, but it's not mandatory. Cooldown reduction, it's okay. It has good active skills, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have this one upgraded. So for sure, this one is the priority, the crit damage increase. Then probably effect resistance. then max HP and survivability if you need it. That's more or less it. Then the next point is going to be the exclusive equipment. So let's have a quick read at it. We have magic resistance increase. Is it important? Not really, because with the way that we're now building the True Essence facility, you will have more than enough magic resistance, but better to have more than some useless stuff like lifesteal. So it's okay. Then we have level 1, No Mercy is enhanced, increasing the bleed damage factor by an additional 40%. Doesn't matter that much, just a bit of additional damage, no big deal. Then we have level 2, No Mercy is enhanced, increasing the duration of bleed by an additional 5 seconds. I would say even without it, it would have been a 100% uptime on the bleed between the active and the special move. So fine, but not too important. Level 3, Ijin is going to recover 300 energy upon a successful evasion. Really, really good. This is just going to help chaining the special moves. This has a cooldown of 6 seconds, but it's fine. Level 4 is what's upgrading the maneuver switch, the dash that it does at the beginning of the fight. And that is also going to decrease the energy of the enemy by 500. Really, really strong. So yeah, overall, pretty solid exclusive equipment, but I would say that level 3 and level 4 are the best ones. For the gear, there is not much to say. Level 4 is the most important one for survivability purposes. Slot 2 only if you're using Ijin as a DPS, and accuracy if you need to hit, because maybe you are below the enemy evasion, even though that's pretty hard nowadays. And evasion, if you really want to, you can level it up. I'm fine with the 130 base. I think it gets to what, 190, 180 at max, so it doesn't matter. It's pretty much the same. And that's it for gear. For the ignition weapon, I would say, from my point of view, Alocasia is the best in slot, because it will just give him additional evasion, but you don't really care too much about that. It will gain a 40% increased evasion against basic attacks. That's great in enhancing survivability. And whenever he evades, he's going to get a 6% physical pierce. Max 5 stacks. Really, really good effect. You could run a Rafflesia. The thing is, while he dodges everything, you might not be affected by status effect that often, so you're not going to leverage this effect that much. Still a valid option if you want to do so, you can do it. But I think Alocasia is better overall for his kit. It really works well on him. That's if you're going for a damage build Ijin. If you just have a frontline utility Ijin, you can run whatever you want. You can run a Sela, you can run a Rafflesia, you can run whatever. Doesn't matter. Totally fine, whatever you pick. But I would say Alocasia is tailored made for him. In terms of stats, I would say slot 4, magic resistance, just to reach that 100%, and slot 5, go for physical pierce. I was pretty unlucky here and I only got a 4% substat in physical pierce in all my other pieces, so 10 from Origin Orb, 40% from main stat, and 4% from substats. Pretty trash, but you still want to aim for at least 99% in both resistances, and then as much pierce as you can. So yeah, solid set. I have better ones than this one, but they are on other units at the moment. So yeah, that's more or less what you want to aim for in the ignition weapon. For Rapport is pretty, like, it's a no-brainer as usual. Just level 5 is nice to have the additional evasion. Level 6 is obviously the most important one for the additional accuracy. Just upgrade it if you don't have enough already, and you're fine. You don't really need to worry too much about Rapport, and I should really stop talking about it. Now, for the last point, that would be team building. Let's just go over the arena simulation real quick. And I don't know why there is always this team, but fine. I think it's the PvP one or something. For team, if you're using a Utility, tank Ijin, doesn't matter. You can use him in whichever team you want. Just position him on the opposite side of whoever you want to reduce the energy of, and you're good to go. If you want to use him as a DPS, obviously the no-brainer option would be to use Albelda with him to buff him. That's pretty obvious, I would say. Then in terms of additional units that can work well with him, I'm not going to say Anak, because Anak has the unfortunate thing that's going to link to Albelda. Because she links at the start of the battle, and at the start of the battle, this guy has no fucking attack. So Anak is going to link to Albelda. It's not a bad thing overall, I'd say, but like you're not going to have an Ijin that spam the special move. Is that what you're trying to achieve? So I'd say she's not that important of a unit. In terms of other units, there is really not too much to go for right now. We have obviously her that's going to provide a physical pierce buff to Ijin, which is pretty good. So Red Mask Warrior is a good support. We have this guy that is going to provide an 80% crit damage buff to all the frontline units. And with this guy having guaranteed crits, that's a pretty major buff. And if you have this guy with the Revolution 5, you're also going to give, like, to apply to the enemies a physical resistance decrease, which Ijin is going to like. So really good pair here. For the remaining slot, I will say Xia is just a common unit to use that provides an attack buff to everyone. And by buffing Albelda's attack, she's also going to increase the attack buff that she provides to Ijin. So it's an even better combo. There are even like other options. Let's say you didn't go for 002. You can use Warrior as well, just for better focus on the enemy team, just to provide also a swiftness increase on Ijin if you are lucky. The additional crit rate doesn't matter, but there is also an attack increase that comes with her, so it's not too bad of a pair. Romei is also a good option, but let's put the support warrior in there. Romei is also a good option, but due to the fact that Ijin dodges a lot, you're not going to have a good uptime on her attack buff. So kind of risky, but could be worth using. Unfortunately, as we can see, there are not really a lot of super like optimal supports for him. He's still going to do fine even in this scenario. You might even say, okay, let's just add an additional tank in the front line just for survivability, to have some distraction so that Ijin doesn't get the blunt of the focus. It's also possible. I wouldn't necessarily use 003 with him, but if you're pulling for him, chances are you have her maxed. She's okay. She has a defense decrease that you don't get from the rest of the units. She has the red element resistance decrease that nobody has. So good, but unfortunately this guy is a multi-hit unit. So other than when she's in the special move, you're not really going to benefit this guy that much. Still worthwhile, still possible to use, not the best option, let's say. Yellowy is pretty much trash because she's going to link to Albelda again, so not too important. I would say these are the kind of setups you can look for with these units. You might even go with the Jinsung just to have sort of an assassination unit and also someone else that's in the midst of the battle and just draw some aggro or something. I don't know. That's possible. Not the best, but yeah. This is more or less it. I don't know if you have any questions, let me know, but this is kind of what you want to look for. I didn't mention obviously mixed elements because this is sort of the best setup. You could forego one slot for another unit because all you really lose from not having a mono red team is 40% attack for every unit that's not red. I should also mention maybe a substitute to Albelda, but there's really no one better than her in this case. But let's say you don't have Albelda, you can just say, okay, let's go for a Garam, for example. Garam is going to work really well with him because this guy already gets a lot of energy. She's going to give him that additional 200 if you have Revolution, but okay, whatever. And she's also going to provide the special move Pierce, which is an interesting buff to provide. And she also has a defense shred in the kit, plus removing enemies buff. So really, really solid option. Obviously, you could run a lot of the strong supports, like Anniversary Hiwa. You could even run, well, no, okay, let's not say anyone of the yellow element. You could run an array. She targets the ally with the highest attack, which in this scenario would be him. Nobody else has more attack than him. It's only a problem if you have an Albelda in the team, because she has more attack than Ijin. But if you don't, in this kind of scenario, he is the highest attack unit. And even if he weren't, even if you're using an Albelda, she's not like a Garam that only focuses on the unit that at the start of the battle has the highest attack, but she always targets the enemy that currently has the highest attack, which is Ijin, also in an Albelda team. So she's fine. We could even use a Reflejo. Here potentially you can really use whatever you want. You don't really have any particular restrictions. And yeah, I was looking if there is any other obvious pair, but not really. So yeah, that's kind of the idea. It will depend a lot on your team composition. You might even just use him as sort of an additional DPS and then run like a Viol as a main DPS, and then this guy is just providing some additional utility. In this scenario, this team could also work, no problem. So it's all up to you at the end, but these are just some ideas and recommendations. Let me know in the comments if you have any doubts, or if in your opinion, I made any mistake. I didn't play much lately, so that's totally possible that I'm missing out on some information, but yeah, that's all I wanted to say, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!